Hello everybody and welcome again to Chris Bosch Props. Hello everyone, I know it's been a while since I've come out with part 2 for this build. I'm a full-time fireman, I'm a full-time husband, so I don't have a whole lot of time to make these videos. I really wanted to do it. I really wanted to get these videos out for you guys, week by week, but mother time has gotten in the way. I apologize. I'm really going to try hard to get these videos out for you guys and get some content to help you guys with your builds. As you can see behind me, I sold my other 3D printed Robocop suit. It's found its home from an eager buyer in Taiwan, so I hope he's pleased with it. I really hope to get that soon filled with this suit. So let's get on into it. So here we are in part 2 of my Robocop build. This is the helmet with a light coat of filler primer. This is what I usually do when I start post-processing my builds, is I'll spray just a small coat of filler primer just to see where all my imperfections are. And then I'm going to show you guys the next step in the process and the materials that I use. This is the product I use to fill in print lines, along in conjunction with the filler primer that I use. It's Bondo Glazing and Spot Putty. It's usually used, most of you probably already know, for automotive purposes, to fill in imperfections in your Bondo work. And it works amazing. It works great for 3D printing. I know there's a lot of people that do videos, especially 3D printed videos, on how to fill lines, and they use wood filler or wood putty that you can find at Lowe's and whatnot. And I've tried it. I have nothing against it. It works. It serves its purpose. It does its thing. It doesn't have as much odor as this product, but I find that it's a bit gritty and it's just a little harder to sand. Not hard to sand, just not as fun to sand. It just seems like it doesn't get as smooth of a surface as Bondo Glazing and Spot Putty. This stuff also dries a lot faster. And usually when they make things for automotive cars, it's a little bit more stronger of a material. Not that wood filler isn't as strong, but it definitely wouldn't be as strong as the Spot Putty. So if you have a respirator mask, you can wear a respirator mask and use this stuff. I go pretty gung-ho with it. I don't use a respirator mask, but it does work well for finished pieces, and you'll be able to tell after I'm finished with this how good it works. Now the filler primer that I use, which you probably have already seen kind of laying around previously, is Dupli-Color Automotive Series filler primer. This stuff is awesome. The only problem I have with it is it's kind of expensive. It's like $7 or more for a can, depending on where you get it. You could usually get it at AutoZone or Napa Auto Parts. Some Napas do not carry it. So it just kind of depends. It's not as popular as the Rust-Oleum filler primers that you can usually get at Walmart. And I have nothing, there's not really much of a problem that I have with the Rust-Oleum filler primers. They do their job also, but they will gunk up your sandpaper. And the one thing I like about this stuff is it doesn't lay on as thick as a Rust-Oleum filler primer, but it does fill your lines after about like 2 to 3 coats, depending on how perfect you want your piece. So yes, this is the stuff I use. Highly recommend. As you can see here, I have quite a bit of print lines here on the front where the visor's at. So what we're going to do is, we're going to take our Bondo Glazing Putty. I'm going to go ahead and dab a little bit on my finger. Like so. You don't have to use your finger. You can use whatever you feel might be necessary. I use my finger. I'll just rub it right here into the lines. Just kind of not press super hard into the lines, but press hard enough where it does fill it. And that was my connection line to my 2 pieces. That'll help blend that in also. This stuff does dry fast. It's kind of a good thing if you're in a rush to finish your pieces. So So there you go. And that's what we do. Sometimes you can cover the whole piece with it. A lot of times I'll let the filler primer do its work on a lot of the big stuff here. I might run a line across my connection pieces right there with it. This line looks a little deeper, so I might come in with some Magic Sculpt epoxy putty, which I'll show you here in just a second of what I do with that. Alright, so on to the next part. For filling large piece lines like that, now this really ain't that bad. You probably don't have to use the stuff that I'm using for these. A lot of people will still just use wood filler and spot putty or whatever kind of putty they're using to fill those lines, and it would be fine. This is just something I've always done. I just think it makes it a lot more structurally sound and finished for my conscience to feel better about when I'm wearing it, basically. But this stuff is still a great product for other props. It don't have to be 3D printed. It can be a resin casting that you got that might have some imperfections. If you want it just 100% sound and strong and still just as tough as the resin that was used, I highly, highly, highly recommend Magic Sculpt Putty. It's usually a 2-part epoxy putty. It comes with a hardener, it comes with putty. As you can tell, these are very, very old, but that's the good thing about it. This has been sitting in my shelf for probably about 3 years, and it's still just as good as the day that I bought it. So what we'll do is we'll get roughly a 1:1 ratio of hardener and putty, and we just mix it together here with our fingers. Alright, we're just about mixed here. There you go. And when you don't see any more marbling and it's one solid gray piece, you're pretty much well mixed. Now what you can do is take a little bit of water from a water bottle from your faucet. It does not matter. I'll pour it into this cap here. You can pour it into a dish depending on how much you'd like to use, and you could just run that water kind of across that line. This just helps to smooth the putty across it. Take a piece like that, and you just kind of push it in there with your fingers, the same thing as the spot putty. The water just helps really smooth it. People use this for sculpting some pretty high quality, high-end stuff. So this is not cheap material, and when it cures, that is one problem with it. It does take about 12 hours to cure, but when it does cure, it's rock solid. They do sell like some plumber's putty in Lowe's, which is the same concept, but that stuff, it can be used for things, but for sculpting and pushing in and having it go real smooth like this, I don't recommend. And it doesn't sand as good as this. This stuff sands like butter once it's finished. And it doesn't have to be perfect, you know, just enough so it gets into that crack, because I'm going to come back and sand this whole thing anyway. So there. It's pretty well in those lines. I'm going to go ahead and finish running this across some other lines, and also put some more spot putty. And then probably tomorrow I'll sand her smooth, and then we'll see what she looks like. I did forget to mention, with the epoxy putty, I'm not a big fan of Bondo. Bondo has its place, you know, with automotive and even with props, but I've never been a big fan of Bondo. You could probably count the number of times on one hand that I've used it. But this stuff, this putty here, can be acted and simulate what Bondo does. So if you have some uneven lines that are connected here, sometimes you just can't get it perfect. and one will be a little bit raised than the other. You can use Bondo, or not, so, I'm sorry, not Bondo, but you can use epoxy putty and have it act as Bondo would. You know, usually with Bondo you'll use like a putty knife and try to get it smooth to flush those lines out. You could do the same thing with this, except I don't like to use a putty knife. I just use my fingers and kind of run it through with the water to blend those uneven lines if you do run into them, which if you're printing large pieces like this, you are going to run into them. So just FYI, and remember that tip. And this stuff is really magic sculpt. It really is. So to kind of illustrate what I was talking about, I ran in to where this side right here was a little higher than this side on this line. So if you were to run your finger across this line, you would feel that this one is just a slight tad higher. So if you were to paint over that, you're going to see that. Now you probably could run some spot putty, some of this stuff, and level that out. It would take kind of a lot, but the putty I think is just much stronger, and it would be much more structurally sound with this stuff than this stuff. So to kind of illustrate what I was talking about, I kind of just loosely put a bead on there. I wet my finger with some water and just kind of push it right in there like that, and then you kind of level it out yourself. You're sculpting, man, you're sculpting. So you're just sculpting that and you're leveling that thing out yourself. That'll probably be good. There you go. And then we'll come back and sand this thing and it'll be smooth.